I call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, August 24th, and the time is 7 p.m. Dr. Richardson, there are a number of items in the table file.
Yes, in your table file you'll find a copy of the PowerPoint presentation for tonight on State of the District Celebrations and Challenges. We also have a number of personnel items, including appointments, increases, decreases, and change in assignment, and also leave of absence and resignations. And we also have information on the TRA part-time teacher program. I'm also planning at the end of our session tonight with items for information to give you a brief update in terms of our work as far as finding an appropriate facility for our portion of the program for the SUN students, those students in Setting 4 that have currently been the Students with Unique Needs program. And we'd also like to take just a minute to give you a quick update on the community facilities planning schedule and basically giving a little more information about what the meetings will be like beginning tomorrow evening.
Okay. Thank you very much. If there's no objection, we'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. We now have an opportunity for public comment. This is a chance for members of the district to address the board. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board? No? Okay. We'll move on to approval of the minutes. Board members, you have in your packet minutes for the regular school board meeting held on August 10th, 2015. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Ellen, second?
Second.
Second by Ann. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes for the regular school board meeting held on Monday, August 10th, 2015, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Those minutes are approved. Announcements and recognitions. Dr. Richardson.
Okay, tonight I just have one, and that is with the, as you'll notice, there are resignations, additional resignation tonight in terms of the baseball coaching. But now with the baseball coaching resignations of both Pete Moss and Tony Matheson, it marks the end of an era in baseball in Northfield. The two teacher coaches have been coaching high school baseball together as a head and a varsity assistant coach at Northfield High School for 30 years. So again, we'd like to congratulate Pete and Tony on a job well done in terms of the baseball program. So thanks to them.
Okay. Is there anything anyone would like to add? No? Okay. We'll move on to items for discussion and reports. The first item is State of the District Celebration and Challenges. As a reminder to board members, there's a PowerPoint in your packet to aid in the presentation.
All right. Well, let's buckle up. Again, we've got quite a bit of information to share with you tonight. Again, would like to call your attention to the fact that you've got the full information in terms of the two-pager of celebrations, the two-pager of challenges, and then also you've got a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that was put in the table file for your use. And in the memory of Carrie Nelson, who is still very much with us, but not here. Maybe that didn't come out quite right. You'll notice in teaching and learning assessment and accountability, the first item, statute, is spelled incorrectly. So my big fingers and little keys don't always work, so you may just want to take your red pen and put an X through the A or the U that's stuck in front of the A. All right, let's take a look at celebrations and challenges, looking at 2014 and looking ahead to 2015-16. First of all, we look at celebrations as far as the Board of Education. Big piece was getting the demographic study and facilities plan completed and preparing us to move forward with looking very specifically at some of the options that were presented in that plan and to get feedback from our community. We did an initial piece of that last spring in terms of sharing information out to staffs and some of our communities, and we will be beginning tomorrow with another round of presentations which will include not only information about the options but also we'll share some basics in terms of the kinds of costing that might be involved in the various kinds of projects. The second big piece was the supporting of student and staff accomplishments with PLCs, school improvement plans. Again, you carve out multiple periods of time during the board meetings in October, November, and December, as well as listening to information about PLCs at the end of the year. Again, I think honoring the fact that we have a number of people that work very, very hard to put those plans together and implement those plans over the course of the year. You also dealt with a few school board policies, and again, we've been able to do that pretty much with individual policies as they needed to be added to or modified. There will come a time again that the board is going to need to say to itself, gee, we need to start over and go back through the policies again. I haven't heard any board members being extremely excited about moving to that realm, but that is a piece that we'll need to take a look at. We also are maintaining our current district strategic plan. We're now going on 12 years with that particular plan. So one of the other things that as a board, I think you celebrate the fact that the plan was very well written and crafted in a way that provided some very, very broad direction for our district in terms of the key focuses. And we really haven't seen the need up to this point to make those changes, but that's obviously something the board again will need to consider. We also are in the wonderful world of DPAC goals and the world's best workforce, and really beginning to tie those more and more together. And you'll be seeing that coming up very soon, again this fall, with our presentation to you on the world's best workforce goals and the plan going forward for the 2015-16 year. But we were able to get all of that material out to you and shared with the department. Unfortunately, the department did not bother to tell us what that should look like, and so we were told this fall that basically all of the districts need to do something different for this year. So we're going to prepare to do something different as we move forward with the plan to provide more data. Also, what we found is they have no desire to look at any links that we might have to anything on our website. And so a lot of the comment coming back was, yes, there may have been a lot more information on the website about your plan, but we didn't bother to look at any of the links. So we will work on that piece. We're going to drive looking at that plan in a way that will make sure that there's a clear summary document, but we still believe it's important for people who like to dig into the website to be able to go deeper, and we'll continue to make that possible. Also, we completed the annual authorizer evaluation and also the charter school evaluation of Arcadia and Prairie Creek, and we began the authorizer renewal process. And so, again, as you remember, we are now into a mode where we need to do an annual authorizer evaluation, which we did back in mid-year, about December. And then we also did the annual evaluation of both Arcadia and Prairie Creek, went out to the buildings, did site visits, collected data, put those pieces together. We'll talk a little bit more about the authorizer renewal process as we go forward. The documentation on that was all completed actually this summer. And Matt and I spent a very enjoyable, probably 50 to 60 hours this week, or a couple of weeks ago, putting this piece together with about an 800-page document going to the Department of Ed for the renewal process. As far as teaching and learning, celebrations. Obviously, this is almost starting. Mary's going, what? More? Obviously, we implemented the expanded role for the Director of Teaching and Learning and really have, I think, now brought that, under that position all of the components that really reflect the teaching and learning aspects within our district. So all of the things around curriculum and instruction, all of the pieces around the title programming, all of the pieces now around RTI and around PBIS and the new MTSS programs, as well as ADSIS. And as part of that, Mary and Cheryl worked very hard to put together and apply for the state ADSIS funding, which we did receive notice of at the end of last year. We also continued to implement response to intervention, RTI, and also the Accelerate Northfield Volunteers, again with support that we provided by the district to provide the coordination of the volunteers and make sure that we got volunteers to the needed sites. We also had middle school systematic intervention, and we really began to see the process of how we could use PBIS and academic interventions at the middle school, and really were able to test that out as they were completing their training to become a PBIS middle school program. We continue, of course, with the 9th grade academy and 10th grade seminar, which continue to be extremely powerful in terms of ways to significantly reduce the number of students that we have that fail one or more courses during their freshman year. And we continued the cognitive coaching and really looked at how can we provide opportunities for those cognitive coaches to help not only probationary staff members during their first 3 years of teaching, but also to help more experienced staff members who feel the need to have additional support. Again, a very positive piece, I think, for our staff members. We also continued with common planning, instruction, flexible grouping, interventions, collaboration, and differentiated instruction. Pretty much the hallmarks of this district in terms of the strategies that we use to make sure that we reach out and try to meet the needs of kids at all levels. And with the fact that we can do that flexible grouping, it does allow us to differentiate instruction at each grade level. And with the RTI, the interventions, and moving forward now into MTSS and other interventions, we're really going to continue to drive that. We're doing those pieces that we believe are really important as far as the linkages, Bridges to K, 6th grade web, 9th grade link. Again, continue to be mentioned by students and by parents as really good ways for kids to make those transitions from building level to building level. We finally completed the Compañeros ESL K program transition with the new 5th grade Spanish literacy. So now we have all 5 grades basically implementing the more complete Spanish literacy and conversational Spanish program with Compañeros. We also fully implemented all-day K, and despite the fact that people thought, oh gee, there may be people that don't want to take all-day K, we had not one single parent not opt for all-day K coming into this fall. We also monitored class size and used contingency staffing, again, to help support programming. We ended up with a significantly larger kindergarten than we anticipated at Bridgewater, and so we needed to use one of those FTE there, but we also used contingency funding to help support needs at the middle school and the high school and in other programs across the district. We continue to work with a curriculum review cycle. I think that's going to continue to change as we move forward now, in that we're seeing the state now making changes in terms of when they want to modify cycles. Most recently, they've decided not to change the math programming till, 2019, Mary? And so that's going to make some changes with us in terms of when we actually institute those cycles. And the other thing that we're going to see as part of that is really thinking about in what cases will we actually end up purchasing new textbooks as opposed to new materials that might be available in terms of electronic ability. We also will continue to do curriculum training for staff. The backbone of making sure that we have staff that are able to be successful in terms of using the new curriculum is to make sure that they're well trained. We continue with online and blended programming at the high school. We've supported the transformational technology implementation with the SAMR model. This last year we were working on augmentation. And so we're going to continue to move forward with that process. And again, understanding that people are moving at different speeds. But we're seeing all of our staff working to build their skills and to build their ability to really support kids with technology that really does transform the way they learn. And we continue to expand Math Core and Reading Core in all of our elementary buildings. As far as assessment and accountability issues, if you remember this last year, the state determined that they would provide the ACT to every single 11th grader. And so while some districts ended up letting school out and only having 11th graders show up, we had a strategy that allowed 11th graders to take the test while other students were still here. We did work with the Northfield Promise to address the state accountability statute, and that has been a very successful partnership in terms of their thoughts around world's best workforce and the core goals of Northfield's Promise match almost to a T. And so it's really given us a leg up in terms of thinking about that, not only from how we share information, but how we measure success. We also implemented universal screening and progress monitoring and implementation of RTI Tier 1 through 3 services. And again, really looking at that screening process as a way for us to know before students start the first day the core levels where they need to start in terms of reading instruction. So we can really get kids going right away as opposed to holding off for any length of time. We've also completed the secondary RTI and PBIS training at both the middle school and the high school, and they began to do pilot implementation during 2014-15. We continued our weekly PLCs. We also continued the end-of-year presentations, and Mary and the RTI coaches, as you remember, came in June and basically presented to you information about the work of the PLCs, and we continued to do the EOPs, or the evidence of practice documents, both for first and second semester. We also streamlined our continuous improvement and staff development process, really working to try to make the documents easier for teachers and building administrators to use. And the commentary back has been it's made it much easier for them to put together those documents as we go forward. We've also implemented state accountability designations, including Read Well by third grade, and again, focused efforts to achieve adequate yearly progress with each subgroup. And finally, we have worked with district assessment coordination, and again, with Hope in place in terms of doing that piece, has done an excellent job for us in terms of carrying on the work of Roger Jennings and working with instructional technology and computers in terms of the fact that as we move forward, almost all of the state testing now is done online as opposed to paper and pencil. We look at student services and special education. Obviously, this last year we continued with the shared special ed director in terms of financial support and implemented an assistant director position. We increased the collaboration of other SPED staff between Faribault and Northfield. We maintained the joint SPED program. We addressed corrective action pieces that were identified by the state. And we implemented the district DCD program at Greenville Park without any problems whatsoever. We also, and I think our special ed staff and administration was very happy to report that our special education students outperformed the state at every level in MCA testing. And as part of the work in terms of preparing for MTSS, we did some shifting in the psychologist role to support MTSS and due process. And you remember MTS is multi-tier systems of support. Very good. All right. We also worked with the Joint Student Services Handbook, where we shared that between our two districts. We worked on assistive technology and again shared that position between our two districts. We're able to continue to do good work there. And we also continue to do the extensive level of training that are required for not only our special education teachers, but our special educational assistants in CPI and CPR. When we look at community services, I should have Aaron do this part, right? Okay.
You want me to do
No, I'm not going to pick on you tonight. Basically, the powerful things, though, included the fact that Community Services stepped in and were ready to do the expanded MDE scholarship program, which gave us access to additional funding to support at least 40 students in terms of the early childhood preschool programming available through Community Services. We increased the school-age summer school participation to 389 students, which is up 34 students from the previous year and could be our all-time high in terms of the most students we've ever had participating in summer programming. We also supported the implementation for the Community Collective Impact and Northfield Promise, and Aaron was a strategic member of that leadership team in terms of helping to put those pieces together. Another major piece that Community Services worked on was putting together the completed first year of the community school at Greenville Park. And again, that has been, I think, an outstanding success. We've had 431 of our Greenville Park students, 151 middle school and high school students, and 630 parents that were involved in some type of programming from the community school for approximately 532 hours of additional programming. So I think we have great things to report to the state in terms of the first year of that implementation. And again, something that I think Northfield Promise has really wrapped its arms around as being a project that really reflects the things that we want to see happening with making those connections between the community and the school district. We also overall had over 31,000 children and adults who participated in various community services programs. Aaron would always want me to say we've done an excellent job of managing the budget, maintained a positive fund balance. And again, remember, this is probably the toughest budget to balance because it is so much driven by how people are feeling about, do I have money to be able to purchase various types of programming for my children or myself? But again, I think the community services people have done an excellent job of maintaining those budgets and making sure a positive fund balance is there. And then finally, over 83,000 children and adults have accessed our district facilities in the last year alone. So, in terms of celebrations for administrative services, we look at HR and staff development. Obviously, we've continued the principal evaluation, implemented the new teacher evaluation systems. Again, Matt Hillman has done an outstanding job of implementing especially the new teacher evaluation system and getting that piece ready to go, working directly with building principals in terms of all of the work that is involved in making that happen. I think we had a really good rollout of that particular system, and we know there continue to be some growing pains as we do with anything like this, but I think we are in really good shape in terms of moving that system forward. We've completed the 2014-16 negotiations last year with 15 different bargaining and meet and confer groups. We also completed our work on self-funded health insurance and continue to work there with basically a 0% increase in terms of the cost of our health insurance program because, again, we moved away several years from a traditional funded health insurance to a self-funded program. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't say to you, HR folks have really been busy and worked hard in terms of the Affordable Care Act. It is a tremendous amount of work. And Molly and Val and other folks have really put their heart and soul into doing the kinds of work that needs to be done there. Because in this case, we have to check every single individual. We have to look at the insurance and other benefits that each person has, make sure that everybody qualifies, and then we do all the fancy calculations to make sure that we are in compliance. So they've worked really hard to make that happen. And we've implemented the bullying prevention and intervention statute. And again, with pretty much very little fanfare. Obviously, the definitions were used, but again, what we found is that in many cases, what some people might have identified previously as bullying doesn't really match the definition. And so we did identify some incidents of bullying at the middle school, but we also found that there were a number of incidents that people might have identified as bullying that really turn out to be fights, or verbal abuse, or physical abuse, or a number of other pieces, but they don't fit the qualifications of having to occur multiple times and having to occur either with a real or perceived imbalance of power. In terms of, again, of human resources staff development, we enhance recruiting and retaining staff in high needs areas. You need to be aware, as I think you're starting to see now in the papers and in news media, we're beginning to see real issues around teacher shortages in certain areas. And while we are so much more fortunate than our colleagues in western Minnesota and northern Minnesota that are now struggling with maybe 2 people to fill a 4th grade position, we're not there yet. But if it comes to special education, if it comes to compañeros programming, if it comes to math and science at the high school level, it's really beginning to become a struggle to find available folks. And that's why it's really important as we negotiate the teacher's contract to make sure that we have a contract that makes us competitive in terms of both recruitment and retention of those individuals. We also recruited and hired quality leaders for both the middle school principal position and assistant principal position. And with the able work of Matt and Kim, we implemented the first EdCamp style professional development day. And again, EdCamp is a very different kind of strategy where you bring folks together and they actually develop the agenda for the day at the initial meeting in the morning. And then people are able to break up and go to various groups. It is the first time that I'm aware of that we've ever had feedback at the end of the day with 100% of the staff present recommending that we use this kind of a methodology again in the future. So people found it was the ability to really dig in and look at topics that they were interested in doing and to basically self-select those topics from among a number of topics. If we look at the technology, obviously we've continued phase 2 of the iPad technology transformation plan in both the secondary in 6 through 12 and in K through 5. Remembering that in 6 through 12 we have one-to-one iPad initiative there. In K through 5 we have pods of pads with 4 to 6 in each of the classrooms. We also continue to work to beef up our wireless network and all the switching and other pieces because again, a set of technology is worthless if it doesn't have totally dependable service. We also beefed up the technology training. We continued this a year ago with the summer tech boot camp, and we also did school year training throughout the year to support staff in terms of working on technology, learning new strategies, learning how to use new apps, and so on. We also continue to refine our district web pages and productivity software and the district network platform. We also supported our new Director of Technology, Kim Brisky, and also continued and finished up the current 3-year technology plan. And then finally, we also really began to significantly boost the level of use of technology communication, especially Skylert at the elementary and secondary, and then Precious Status at the preschool level to basically provide quality information to our parents about activities, about programming, and about things that were going on. In terms of facilities, security, crisis intervention, child nutrition, we basically there, again, completed that demographic and facility study and got those pieces ready to begin presenting and did begin presenting last spring. We prioritized and completed projects on our old 10-year capital plan. Matt will be talking to you a little bit later tonight about the new 10-year plan and the ties into the long-term deferred maintenance program. We refined our facilities and staffing plan. We worked on meal patterns and new breakfast patterns. And we did phase 1 high school cafeteria upgrades and the farm to school initiative and ship mini grads. So a lot of work was done there. You may have noticed too, I think, as you listen to the news, you've heard some people saying, well, you know, kids are not necessarily very happy with their lunch programs in various districts. We really have not heard that kind of feedback. But if you look at and go into our cafeterias, you know that at every level, even at the elementary, there are multiple choices for students so that kids can choose salads, they can choose burrito bars, they can choose a la carte, they can choose a lot of different things. However, every single one of them is upgraded in terms of nutrition. Unfortunately, I'm not finding the French fries and cheeseburgers to be out there anymore. Too bad. But I think I think both Pam and now our new director basically have really focused on how do we make sure that we provide quality meals, and I think Stephanie will continue that work. And then we expanded security measures and training, again, to make sure that we were in a position to support trying to maintain the greatest level of security we could for our buildings. As far as budgets and funding, we maintained a cash balance and budget reserve while we maintained current staff and programs for both 2013-14 and 2014-15. So we made no cuts in staffing. We also were, I think, we're very good stewards of the operating capital and capital projects levy while we use sustainable leasing for our Phase 2 transformational technology program. So again, I think we have really tried to think about how do we make sure we can maintain programs for as long as we can and make sure that when we do things like technology where we know they need to be refreshed on a regular basis, using a leasing strategy as opposed to a purchase strategy. We've also, in terms of budget and funding, addressed class size issues caused by lack of funding in choice programs. And again, contingency funding has been used there. And we addressed title and special education funding shortfalls that have been caused by federal sequestration, which unfortunately continues to this day. We're continuing to deal with the fact that every year we're seeing an increased level of sequestration, which means a reduction in federal funding. That's all of our celebrations. So let's talk about challenges. So going forward as a board, what are the things that you're looking at? Well, I think we need to continue to monitor our calendar changes. As you know, as part of the negotiation process, we did some minor tweaks on our calendar for the 2016-17 year going forward, and we'll be bringing that to you in September to approve the 16-17 calendar. We are really now ready to go back out and gather additional feedback from staff and parents and community. And really in this round, we're going to spend more time talking to folks about what are the options. What does this look like? What kind of remodeling or construction or additions might be included in this program, and what those different options cost and what the impact is on property taxpayers of moving in that direction. Our hope is that we can come back to you about mid-year to be able to talk to you specifically about the possibilities to move forward with one or more projects and to talk to you about what would that look like if we move forward with submitting some kind of a bond referendum to the community next spring. We also are planning to provide data supporting the World's Best Workforce statute with new documentation required by the state. And I know that once Mary and Hope get done with the fun of getting the school year started, that's going to be our big job in September, is putting all of the materials together to be ready to move that forward in the new format that now the state has decided that we're going to use, which, by the way, we asked for 2 years ago but didn't receive, by the way. We also, in terms of the board's work, we basically have now completed the 5-year charter authorizer renewal submission. And again, we sent in our special thumb drive with approximately 800 pages of documentation and narrative to show the MDE the depth and breadth of the work that we've done to help support our charters. And we've also know that we're going to need to complete the annual evaluation process for Arcadia and Prairie Creek. And we also will need to renew Prairie Creek this year because they come up for their 5-year evaluation and new contract renewal. One of the things that is going to be a little interesting with this is until we are actually approved to implement a new renewed application, we are not really allowed to renew anybody's contract. So our hope is that they will move quickly over the course of the next several months to get that done. We've also been in discussion also with some of our legislators about looking at the kinds of requirements that are expected from public schools who are authorizers in comparison to non-public, private, single-purpose authorizers, and whether all the same data needs to be provided, since much of the data that we provided, at least in the first portion of our renewal document, are things that you're responsible for, or I'm responsible for, or somebody in our district is already responsible for, in terms of things like making sure we have licensed administrators, making sure that we basically have completed 125 clock hours of professional development every 5 years, making sure that we actually know something about staff development, about HR, about discipline, about policy making, about budgeting and programming. So it will be interesting as we go forward with this to see exactly how this plays out when we begin the next part of this renewal process, which will actually be, we believe, sometime in November, when they will be asking us to come in to do an interview with their folks. And they will have an evaluator at that time chosen who will take us through an evaluation process and interview, and then determine if there are things that we need to change or to redo in order to be considered to continue as an authorizer going forward for the next 5 years. We also know we'll need to continue to revise individual board policies. Again, I'm not necessarily suggesting to you at this point that you need to go back into the mode of going through all the policies again as we did a number of years ago, but there will come a time when that needs to be thought about, and that will take a board committee to really sit down and go through each of the areas of that piece. And I think, Noel, you are the only surviving member of the group that worked on that process earlier. It was not an easy process. It was a long process. We went through a lot of information materials, but it does put us in a much better position going forward when we make sure that we have quality policies and procedures in place to work from. We also will review efforts of our PLC and building program improvement teams. And we also, I think, will be coming back to the board again this year saying, at this point, are you ready to take a look at reviewing our district strategic plan and determining if there needs to be any modifications in that plan. As far as teaching and learning, Mary, we're finally where you can maintain your role. But as you can see, those are all the kinds of things now that Mary's responsible for: teaching, learning, curriculum instruction, RTI, PBIS, MTSS, Title 1 through 3, District Assessment Coordination, also the ALC and the Longfellow Building. And again, she does it very, very well. Also, we'll be continuing to work and massage the 9th grade academy and 10th grade seminar. We'll be continuing to look at interventions for social and emotional needs, which again will be tied back a lot to PBIS, which is really looking at behavior strategies. We'll continue cognitive coaching. We'll continue common planning instruction, flexible grouping, cluster learning, and interventions. And we definitely plan to continue Bridges to K, Web, and Link. We'll also be looking at monitoring the implementation of now the fully modified Compañeros ESL kindergarten program, including the Spanish literacy curriculum that's available in grades 1 through 5. We also will be looking at class size and enrollment changes. Those numbers have been kind of all over the place this summer. People started out fairly low. Numbers are growing. We hope everything and believe that everything is going to work out just fine in terms of our total numbers. The good thing is we're not seeing numbers dropping. If anything, we're seeing numbers going up. We'll be looking at implementation of the next curriculum cycles. We'll be maintaining our support for English learners. We're now in the SAMR technology model. Moving to the modification level becomes somewhat more difficult as people are really looking at how do we really modify our instruction to use the technology effectively for learning. We'll be monitoring our all-day K program in terms of the work there, and really thinking about it especially in terms of how close we came to being in a universal pre-K program requirement. And again, we're working with our legislators and with the governor's office and with MDE, trying to help them to understand the impact of moving to universal pre-K without the necessary funding and without the necessary facilities to make that happen. Also, our intention would be to support the implementation of the MSHSL Why We Play program that was presented to you earlier this summer. In terms of assessment accountability, big piece here is going to be the implementation and communication of the revised WBWF standards, communicating and collaborating with Northfield Promise, career and college readiness, and strategies to achieve those goals. And we have a number of directions we're headed there. Again, part of those with Northfield Promise, part of those with South Central Community College, where we're really looking at and working on approaches that we can use to have partnership with South Central along with Riverland, and also looking at partnerships in terms of CTE or career and technical education, again where there have been resources provided to us through HCI that are going to help us to provide additional support for that. And again, if I haven't said it before, again, we really appreciate Zach Pruitt and all the work that Zach does in terms of being the phenom of grant writers and being able to find money for almost everything we need. And in fact, is basically is providing us parts of two individuals who are going to be able to provide direct support in terms of CTE. We also are now in the point where, because of Mary's work and Aaron's work and Hope's work, we're at the point where ADSIS is ready to go forward along with Cheryl Hall in terms of special education, in terms of implementing the ADSIS-funded interventions for this fall. And remembering that we were able to add basically over 2 additional FTE to our staffing with the funding that's coming from ADSIS. And that funding will allow us to do more interventions throughout the grade levels, and especially expanding the interventions at the middle school and the high school. We also have RTI coaches, classroom teachers implementing RTI, universal screening, progress monitoring, problem solving, and tiered interventions. And we're now at a point where we will see the full implementation of RTI, PBIS, and MTSS at the secondary level. So you're going to see students be able to have interventions in both reading and mathematics at both the middle school level and at the high school level, with a little bit different strategies in each one. Really a push-in program at the high school level where additional staffing goes into the classroom with the regular math or science or reading teacher, and at the middle school level where it's actually a pull-out program where students who have special additional needs in terms of reading or mathematics actually are able to come out and be in a class that has a smaller enrollment and more focused efforts in terms of helping them meet their needs. As far as assessment and accountability, we're also looking at professional learning communities, focusing on analyzing the data, identifying students, implementing strategies. We'll be continuing to use all of those year-end presentation, EOPs about PLCs. We'll be addressing statutory changes impacting ACT, because after 1 year of everybody doing ACT, now we are back to the ACT is for everybody who wants to take it, not everybody in 11th grade. We will probably use an opt-out strategy where we basically say to folks, unless you tell us you don't want to take it, everybody's going to take it. Also, very fortunately, because the state really was upset with Pearson and the problems Pearson had with delivering the MCA testing, Pearson has decided that they will fully fund the ACT for the 2015-16 year. So before, we only had a small portion, $3 million, to fund all of the students in the state that need to take the ACT test. Now we'll be covered for the full amount. The problem is that's a one-time only thing. So as of the start of next year, while we are required to offer any student who wants to take the ACT an opportunity to do it at the school district's expense. There will not be enough money to fund it from the state, and the money will have to come from school districts to make up the difference. We also will be responding to increased test demands, and again, Hope has done a phenomenal job of working with us in terms of looking at that testing. Everything now, again, is moving to online testing, and so the coordination and the technology availability need to be there, which also requires us to have our crack tech team, who basically makes sure everything is up and running and all the different devices are ready to go, so that we have minimum, if no problems, unless the state or Pearson has a problem. In terms of special education, for this year, a little different strategy. We're now moving to the implementation of a new Director of Special Services, Cheryl Hall, who is now just ours. And she will begin, actually began as of July 1 in that position. We've already been working her hard. We'll also be redefining the role of the Assistant Director of Special Services for 15-16. So Lynn Kreminga, who has been with us now for a couple of years, will really be looking at strategies for how best to use those two people in what is becoming a more and more difficult process because of the number of students we have and the severity of the kinds of needs that they're trying to address and face. We also will be continuing this year with Faribault with the Sun, the STEP, and the Setting for EBD programs at the Cannon River Center in Faribault, remembering that at the end of this year, those programs go away in the format that they're currently in. So part of what we're trying to do right now is to prepare our alternatives for supporting all of our Setting for programs for fall. Because of the choice of a couple of our districts that had originally looked at being involved in SEMSEC, of not being comfortable with funding the entire cost of the build-out of the program facility in Owatonna. At this point, Northfield and Faribault are continuing to move forward with looking at a way that we can provide all the programs using a slightly different structure than we used before. And in that setting, part of the programming will be maintained at CREC, and part of the programming will come here. So right now we're going to be looking at having the SUN program here, and the EBD program will stay at the CREC Center in Faribault. This allows us to balance the two pieces out. As a result, we're currently looking at strategies for providing the appropriate facility. We've made contacts with a local realtor who has helped us to find a couple of different buildings that we're looking at. And we're also doing some initial talking with our friends at Laura Baker, Oak Street, as a possibility of potentially looking at implementing the SUN program in collaboration and coordination with the educational program that's currently provided for students at Laura Baker, because they basically have students who are in very much similar situations in terms of the SUN programming. And we feel that potentially putting those two programs together may end up providing us the most high-quality option. And they have a facility that's already constructed at the Laura Baker site that would be available. So we're kind of looking at a couple of different pieces right now, again with the idea that we really need to get this buttoned up in the next several weeks. And so you'll probably hear more from us back on this at probably one or more of the September meetings, with the idea that hopefully we can come to a resolution in terms of an option, so that whatever kind of build out that needs to occur and whatever other kinds of work we need to do to prepare to implement the SUN program here in Northfield next year, those will be ready to go. Again, as we've told people, as I told you very clearly, the best alternative would have been to have all 5 districts together. It is the most efficient and the most effective way of providing programming because of the larger number of students that could be supported with highest level trained folks and all of the ancillary services. This, however, is a very good alternative if the direction is that we need to maintain this with Faribault and Northfield alone. And it would give us the options, if we're looking at this, to also potentially allow other districts from our area who need places for SUN level students to also participate. and we will probably make that offer as we go forward. We also will need to support and clarify the role of psychologists in MTSS and the due process efforts. And we'll need to train and implement mandated district-wide restrictive procedures. Again, that's been somewhat of a moving target in terms of the expectations. I think we're finally down to the point where the final set has been locked in there. And that obviously is a more difficult situation because with the restrictive procedures piece in place, we have to be extremely careful and extremely well trained in terms of how we address situations if a student behavior is out of control, but he or she is not injuring themselves or other people. We also will be maintaining the Total Special Education Systems Manual. Okay, I see item number 2 I misspelled. Let's move that around. We also will be forming a Special Education Caseload Workload Procedures Committee and formalizing procedures for implementation. If you remember earlier this summer, we asked you to go ahead and approve a new workload policy for special education, which was part of the changes made in the legislature in this last session. And now we'll be looking at specific procedures to talk about caseloads for various special education programming. And a whole group of training pieces also need to be included, which include the things we've done before, as well as data privacy and specialized instruction. We also will need to partner with agencies providing direct access to mental health services. Some of you may be aware of Fernbrook, which is a mental health collaborative, and we have now entered an agreement with Fernbrook to provide services in our district, and so there will be Fernbrook employees that will be part of our cadre of staff that work with students with mental health needs. Again, this reflects the fact that the county is continuing to draw back on what it's able to do with the resources that are available, and most districts now are having to think about how do we provide more mental health services on our own. We also now, with the new law, new statute, have to design and implement newly required special ed training for SPED educational assistance, and we will also need to monitor due process procedures for the students placed at Laura Baker, because even before we look at the implementation, hopefully, of a collaborative program with Laura Baker, state law changed in the last couple of years, and basically where Laura Baker before was controlled by DHS, Department of Human Services, we are now, as a school district, required to oversee the work that Laura Baker does with any school-age student who is placed in their program. Another reason why it may be a very fortunate time for us to think about a collaborative effort with Laura Baker, because we already are now having to step in and basically provide oversight services because of the licensure requirements and the due process requirements that are needed. And then finally, we'll need to implement and maintain our federal and state special ed budgets. We'll have to review and update our fiscal and due process procedures because we are getting ready for a site monitoring visit. So that's coming in 2015-16, where they will come out, review everything that we're doing in terms of special education, determine any changes or modifications or any corrective action that needs to occur. And again, our special education folks will be gearing up for that as we move into this year. Also in special ed, we'll oversee the ADSYS implementation of leadership team and progress reporting and end-of-year MDE report. And again, because ADSYS is really alternatives to delivering special education services using funding from special ed for non-special ed students, this is going to be very important that Cheryl and the folks in special education are really on top of this, along with Mary and other folks. We also will be collaborating with community services and targeted services in terms of expanding opportunities for students with special needs. And again, I think we've had, I don't know what it's doing. Is it telling me it's time for me to stop? Maybe that's it. I'm feeling like it's about there. And so, we'll need to continue that process. Okay, do we have a main one?
We keep talking, I'll fix it.
I'll keep talking. Okay. All right, so now if we look at community services in terms of challenges, we're looking at expanding student access to early learning scholarships provided by MDE, so we're continuing to see more scholarships provided for our district. Again, we are a 4-star Parent Aware program, which gives us the advantage of being able to get resources not only through scholarships that are provided directly to parents, but also scholarships that are provided to our school district. And as part of that, we're also looking at how do we provide models and spaces for early childhood programs. So we're going to be doing some modifications again at Longfellow. Those of you that have been involved in DPAC or other programming that's met over in the conference room in Longfellow, we aren't going to be meeting there anymore. We're now going to be moving to multiple different places. Could be right here. It may be at sometimes at the NCRC, but we're going to need that room for students in preschool every single day of the year next year. So we'll be moving that whole process. And we'll be supporting collective impact in the initiative in the Northfield Promise. We also want to look at, again, as Erin and her folks do every year, is securing funding for PLUS and school readiness programming and making sure that those funds are there. And again, we've had great support from a variety of community entities over the years to make sure that we have the funding we need to help support programs like the Bridges to K and other types of programming that we do. So again, important to have that continue. We also hope to successfully achieve our attendance goal and frequency targets in year 2. Again, if anything we've seen from the levels of involvement we have this year, I think it's in the bag. But I know Erin and her folks will make sure that that goes the way it's supposed to go so that we hit not only the number of people attending, but also the frequency of their attendance. Also, as always, maintaining revenues and expenditures to support fee-based and grant-supported programs. Okay, as we look at HR and staff development, we basically have to complete the 2015-17 negotiations with the Northfield Education Association, which Matt will be talking to you about just a little bit later tonight. The good thing is that work happened over the course of the summer, and we're ready to get that done. But as we do that, we also need to be prepared to begin negotiations discussion with 15 other bargaining and meet and confer units. We also will be continuing self-funded insurance and monitoring that process. Again, that's looking good. We need to continue to respond to the Affordable Care Act. We, again, I think are going to continue to have to focus on recruiting and retaining quality staff. And we really believe that the settlement that we have at this time is going to help that to happen, because it does allow us to maintain a competitive level with not only southeast Minnesota, but also the southern metro, which is where, in all actuality, we're drawing a number of our folks who are highly qualified and experienced teachers that other folks really have not had an opportunity to draw from. Also, looking at job descriptions, rankings, evaluations, all the things that we do on a yearly basis. We also will be monitoring principal evaluation and the new teacher evaluation system now and making additional modifications. Again, we're moving from that initial implementation. Now we're smoothing out any rough spots that we have, making sure that we have necessary strategies to make sure that we can get all the parts of that evaluation completed. Also with the fact that, as we talked to one principal today, that individual will have, I believe he indicated to me he would have like 13 new people that he needed to evaluate this year who are new to the system, as well as a number of folks who are now on high cycle or need to be evaluated. So this is a very significant process. It is absolutely the most important thing, I think, as a school district we do in the buildings is evaluate and help support the improvement of our teaching staff, but it is a big piece. And remember that unlike districts that have QComp, we do not, and therefore we have significantly smaller levels of resources to do this work than a number of other districts in the state. And we know that the department and the governor's office have been looking at the potential of modifying QComp to provide opportunities for every district to be involved. But right now, there's not enough money in the program to fund every district. And so one of the things we hope to see as we go in the next legislative session are going to be efforts to try to address equity in that area. We're also looking at integration of HR and finance software and also monitoring the implementation of the bullying prevention status, again, to make sure that we can determine the impact for both students and staff in terms of the program. As far as technology, we're continuing the technology transformation plan. We're expanding, and in that plan, basically, we now are moving this year to not only one-to-one initiative for grades 6 through 12, but also one-to-one in grades 4 through 5. And the key difference being that for 4th and 5th graders, the equipment stays at school. It doesn't go home, but students will have access to it all day. And for grades 3 through, or K through 3, basically now their pod will be approximately 12 minis in each classroom, so it means basically one tablet computer for every 2 kids. So again, a very much expanded process to help support kids there. We'll be maintaining expanded technology training. As you know, this summer we didn't have Tech Boot Camp. Instead, we had Tech Tuesdays. And so every Tuesday, the entire summer, we had half-day training sessions with multiple sessions or multiple programs being provided in each session to help staff work on learning about apps, working on how to use the technology effectively in terms of learning with their students. And most of those sessions were either provided by folks in terms of the technology department or staff members who volunteered to come in and basically provide training for their colleagues. So I think a very positive piece and a somewhat expanded piece, because we not only did technology, but we also did some other pieces that were tied to learning and tied to staff development in general for staff members. We also maintained our replacement cycle, and we went through, as you remember last spring, the strategy for how we're going to bring the new technology on board for both the 6 through 12 and moving with the minis, moving down into 4th and 5th grade and then down into K through 3. And again, working to maintain the leasing cycle and leasing dollars so that we can fund that. We also continue to work with district and building web pages, and we're now implementing a new 3-year technology plan. In terms of facilities, security, and crisis intervention, child nutrition, basically that district master facilities plan, we're now at a point where once we go through the process with our community and our staff, we'll be taking a look at the major priorities for options in terms of facilities, putting dollar figures to what those cost and what they will do for us, and getting direct feedback from our community and our staff about their support of various kinds of projects, because we know as a board, before you can be comfortable beginning to look at that, you need to know what our community is saying. We'll also be addressing priority capital projects with a 10-year capital plan and the new long-term facilities maintenance funding. We'll be talking about that a little bit later tonight in terms of how that piece will be implemented, but that, again, provides additional resources because we now have, moving forward into FY17 and beyond, additional funding for long-term facilities maintenance. We also will be continuing to address building security projects and staffing, and also working to enhance our relationship with the Northfield Police Department. We did some of that work even this summer with having them be involved with us in terms of training that we're providing for kids and for parents about internet security and cyber security going forward. We'll also be continuing to update our crisis intervention plans, continuing with the new meal patterns and breakfast and healthy snacks, and the Farm to School initiative. In terms of budgets, we're going to maintain that cash balance, the budget reserve required to address our state funding, and basically to maintain our staff programs and services for both this year, 2015-16, and for 2016-17. And again, we'll address any shortfalls or delays or underfunded mandates because we do have the resources with our fund balance to make that happen. We also will be maintaining stewardship of our operating levy and capital projects levy and making sure that we can have sustainable funding for Phase 2 technology using the lease process. We'll also continue to look at ways to address class size issues. That's not going to ever go away. Because remember, even with the 2% and 2% that we talked about for this year, which everybody was cheering and so on as we went through that process, understand that's the first time in a long time when we've actually met the level of inflation. And we would need $2,400 to $2,600 per pupil more added to the basic formula to give us the same buying power as we had in 1991. So, we can talk about money and we can talk about the pieces that are there, but we are struggling. And, the good thing is if you look around the metro right now, most districts are still cutting. Lakeville is cutting. South Washington is cutting. Farmington is cutting. Up into the metro area, districts are cutting because, again, the resources are not matching the needs. And again, the only reason we're in the position we are is, again, we've had a community that's been extremely supportive of our efforts in terms of the operating levy and the capital projects levy, and because I think we have been extremely careful stewards of the money that we have. And then finally, we need to prepare for additional title and special ed funding shortfalls because of federal sequestration, which hasn't gone away. We are meeting with Representative Klein on Friday to talk about what he believes is the outlook of actually getting passage of the new No Child Left Behind, which now has a new name, but it's the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. And as you may know, Representative Klein is the chair of the conference committee, and so we hope to be able to get some sense of where that is going and what other support Minnesota can give him as we go forward. So that's celebrations and challenges. Questions?
Okay. Board members, are there questions or comments? Ellen?
Well, first, of course, thank you once again for providing us this report, because every time you do it, you think you've been here and that you would know everything you're saying, but there's a few pieces that are, if not new to me, at least more nuanced understanding, so it's really helpful. I had just one question about,
Sure.
It's in the celebrations.
Okay.
Where you talked about the online learning courses and blended instruction at the high school. And, we've been watching what Farmington's been doing with their iPads, and I just wasn't sure. There's nothing in the challenges that brings this to light, but if we were thinking about some of the things that strategies of how they've used it for sort of online learning strategies from home.
And we've had those discussions. In fact, it's on the agenda for Cabinet tomorrow. Because part of the discussion is thinking about, the idea of really eliminating the concept of a snow day at some point, where we would be able to say, you have a virtual learning day today. You basically can get your assignments and your information on your iPad, and you'll be able to do the work that you need to do from home. And we are wanting to look much more seriously at that process. That's taking some time to really kind of get it thought through. But that would be the place that we're headed, is in terms of thinking about the fact that, especially now that I think our teachers have become much more comfortable with using Schoology and using Schoology to provide information, to put out assignments, to put out information that students need to review and whatever. We think that's the next logical step. And frankly, we have tended to try to stay about one step behind Farmington for a reason. Because I think, Farmington is, we talk about being on the bleeding edge and being on the cutting edge. We love to be on the cutting edge. We don't want to be on the bleeding edge. And so, I think they're learning a lot of things as they go through the process. And we will be looking very carefully at the work that doing. And Matt, I don't know if you have any other thoughts you might want to share on that.
I think just the other piece of the challenge that we're looking for the coming years is, can we take the success that we've had with the online summer Phi-Ed program? So there's a number of students who take online Phi-Ed. It's a personal fitness course in the summer. Are there other required courses, say going into sophomore year, where we could provide some kind of opportunity in the summer to provide those students more flexibility in their regular year schedule? And we already have a precedent for how to do it with contracts and all that kind of stuff with the summer online PE. We've had a number of students take advantage of that over the years, and it has been very successful. Now that there are some things we have to allow more students, or maybe all of them, to keep their iPads over the summer. That could be a possibility in terms of if people wanted to turn on, they certainly could. That's going to be a discussion we have to have. But how can we take advantage of that time over the summer where maybe we could offer some additional programming that's maybe required courses, maybe it's some elective courses, to try to get at some of that year-round education that we've been looking at, and yet also provide flexibility for students and possibly a little bit less stress in terms of class size during the regular academic year.
Thank you.
Jeff?
You say virtual day. Is that done anywhere successfully as you know it?
Well, right now, actually, Farmington did it this last year. Now, they do have a distinct advantage over all the rest of us because they're in what's called an innovation zone. And so Farmington and Spring Lake Park have the ability to go around, it's not a subversion, but they actually have the ability, exemption from a number of the requirements that other districts have to do. And as part of that, they have been toying with how to do these virtual days when they had some snow days this last year. They're doing it. We're reading about it around the country, too, because there are a number of districts that have significant numbers of technology devices available for kids where they actually have begun to work on that particular process. So we're trying to kind of watch what's happening in other districts, trying to look at what seems to be working well and not, and trying to think about how we build that into the work we might do in terms of a virtual day here. So, yeah, it's coming, Jeff. Yeah.
Obviously, wireless would be the main thing that people would need to have to get that connection, and not everybody's going to have Wi-Fi at home. So how do you overcome that if you're going to have a virtual day?
Well, the one thing we do know right now, and Matt, can you give me the best number right now?
About 94% of our students.
94% of our kids currently have Wi-Fi access. So the ability to find or to work it through for the other 6%, we think could end up being a doable option down the road if we need to do that. There are obviously other locations within the community that students can go to do that. And unfortunately, I'd like to say to you, when we have a snow day, nobody leaves their home. But we know that that's usually when we have a spike at the Mall of America. Mm-hmm. And so considering that there are other locations within our community where Wi-Fi access is possible, our hope would be that students who might not have access at home would be able to access it in one of the other locations within the community with the Wi-Fi access. The other option we might even look at would be an option where even on a snow day we might be able to open a building or two, because we tend to have kind of the skeleton crew is here on those days to offer an option for students who would need to use it to basically come into a building later in the day, typically after snow falls over and plows are out and whatever, and to get their homework done if they need to do it that time.
I think, Jeff, one of the strategies that we've seen a couple of districts do, the people who are really on the front edge of this, is that they're beginning to anticipate and they're having students download the materials to the device before they leave. So if the weather forecast is looking such that, okay, in the next couple of days we want to make sure you have these pieces downloaded. That's not completely perfect either, but we're learning and we're keeping a close eye on what those other districts are doing. Farmington actually this year has got what they call not even just the snow days. They have 4 flexible learning days, which are actually considered as student days, but where no students will attend school. And it's basically taking their virtual day for the snow piece and taking it one step further in terms of that. So that allows them to address some of their calendar start and end issues while yet still having instruction take place. So we're closely, there are challenges with any kind of one of these pieces, but the challenges aren't so great that we shouldn't continue to at least explore.
Any other questions or comments, board members? Rob?
One specific celebration I think that should be mentioned is I'm thinking about the graduation rates in Northfield, that the graduation rates for Hispanic and free and reduced lunch program students is higher than the percentage for all students statewide. So statewide, I think for all students it's something like 81.2%, and in Northfield for Hispanic students it's 88.2%.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a large part of the success in Northfield is due to the Torch program.
Absolutely.
So I think one of the points of celebration is that we've committed to financially supporting one of the coordinator positions in the Torch program, and I hope that, as we think about the challenges, that we continue to support that, and that if need be, we expand that support to keep that going, because for students in that program, the graduation rate is 96%, so it's an extraordinarily effective program.
Exactly. And one of the things we know is we have been contacted by a number of folks around the country trying to get a handle on how does this Torch program work. We were identified by District Administrator Magazine as a district of distinction in their first round of identification on the Torch program. We've actually had it presented on the floor of the Senate. Al Franken has presented it, and we've shared that information also with Representative Klein. So I think that there are multiple ways that we're sharing that piece out. But it is something that absolutely is worth noting, is that we have a high graduation rate, but which you might expect for those students who are in our community, especially a community that really values education. But it's really phenomenal for those students who traditionally have not been in that place to have the kind of level of graduation rate and success, and not only graduation, but moving on to post-secondary educational opportunities that we have. Because, as you said, typically a student in the Torch program, if they complete one or more college-level classes through PSEO while they're still in high school, there's like a 70 or 80% chance that they're going on to college, and a very significant chance that they're going to graduate from college, which a decade ago, we had 36% was our graduation rate for Latino students. So that's been a phenomenal change, and the Torch program is absolutely the reason why that's happened. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? No?
I would congratulate you for the excellent leadership that you provided to the district, to the whole team, and the community appreciates it. So thank you.
Thank you. And understand, this is a team effort. This doesn't happen because I'm here. It happens because all these people are here. They do great work every day. They're not looking for accolades or whatever. I try to give them whenever we can. But it's the whole idea that when we're working on what we're trying to do for kids, we're all doing it as a group, and that keeps coming back. And it really ties back to our mission statement. This is all about how do we help every kid to participate in our changing world, and to do that, everybody has to step up and do that part of that process. So thank you, Noel.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on now to items for individual action. The first item is a long-term facilities maintenance review and 10-year plan. Dr. Hillman is here to present that.
And I usually do the talking and someone else does the work, and so I've asked Jim Kulseth, one of my celebrations for last year, our new buildings and grounds director, to be here to support me as we talk through the facilities maintenance revenue program. As you recall, last meeting I gave you an overview of the new legislation. So just to remind you that the long-term facilities maintenance revenue program was created, large part Senator Kevin Dahl from right here in Northfield. As you know, this was supported by Schools for Equity and Education, as well as the Minnesota Association of School Administrators, the Minnesota School Boards Association. All of the big players said this was an absolute thing that we needed to do for equity in terms of facilities revenue among all schools, not just the 25 that got it before. Just to remind you, really what it does is it combines the old deferred maintenance and health and safety programs and then also expands the dollars. It gives additional dollars right away in FY17 and then additional dollars over the next 2 fiscal years. Now, it does require a 10-year plan submission, and that's what we're here to ask you for tonight. So the 10-year plan is nothing new to us. We've had one in existence for many, many years. What we do have to do this year differently is that a state template requires us to really summarize that very lengthy and detailed and specific 10-year plan by UFAR's finance code, and that's real exciting stuff. So we're going to keep you riveted here. And as usual, as you might expect, with any public school, we will always have more projects identified that would qualify for the funding than we will actually ever get money for. And that's okay. What they really wanted us to do was say, identify the projects that you believe need to happen over the next decade. We know that you're not going to be able to fund all of them, but we want you to make sure that your eyes are wide open for each of those projects and know where they stack up in your prioritization. So we are asking you to provide us approval tonight of the 10-year plan, and the document that was in your board packet is what we officially have to give you. Now, that was supposed to be printed out on a legal-size piece of paper. Of course, a legal-size piece of paper wouldn't fit neatly in your board packet, so we've done some Excel magic to make a reasonable facsimile. So as we get into this, we just thought what we would do is just give you a couple of examples, or one example of a kind of project that we would do under each of those finance codes that are listed in your packet. And I don't have the numerical code on the side, I'm just giving you the general component here. So when we think of that physical hazards code, something that we would pay for out of that long-term facilities maintenance revenue would be the annual elevator and lift inspections that we need to do. Again, not very glamorous, but it's something we're required to do each year. We're allowed to use this money to do that, therefore we use the money to do it, or we're suggesting that. Other hazardous materials are things like computer and bulb disposal. So when computers and a lot of our bulbs from within the district, the fluorescent, those are hazardous waste. They need to be disposed of in a specific way. We can use these dollars like we used to be able to use health and safety dollars to dispose of those. Environmental health and safety management, we actually pay for some salary. So for some of Jim's salary, some of Lori Pryor's salary can be coded to this particular area. Also things like science material disposal, so some specific chemicals or things that have to be disposed of in a specific way. We can pay for that with this money. Asbestos removal and encapsulation, this is for the smaller projects under $100,000. There is one part of this new program that would allow us to specifically identify and get additional funding for asbestos removal projects that are over $100,000 per site. Now, we no longer have any projects that would exceed $100,000. We do have a handful of smaller projects, but they're all under $100,000 per site, and we continue to chip away at those things over the years. Those are all encapsulated. They're perfectly fine. Just a matter of continuing that process or removing that. The fire safety code, there's things like alarm testing. We have to pay a company. We just did in the last week. All of the people in the high school were treated to incessant alarm ringing as they test those pieces. And then also Jim discovered that we have a door. It's a roll-up door in one of our cafeterias that had been identified by the fire marshal. It's a piece that's pretty expensive. It's one of those kind of cage-looking doors. It almost looks like a garage door. That is the kind of piece that can also be paid for using the fire safety component. We've identified that as a priority on our project moving forward. Indoor air quality, things like replacing an HVAC unit. Accessibility, looking at things like an auxiliary gym ramp so that students with handicap accessibility needs are able to get into those areas. that may still not be as accessible as they should be. The building envelope, another big thing, that's a huge piece of our stewardship, protect the building envelope. It's just, that's what Chris and Paul and Jim have told me, that we protect the building envelope, we make sure that all the tuck pointing is done, and the windows are, if we can keep water outside of the buildings, we're going to be much happier on the insides of the buildings. When we think about building hardware and equipment, that money can be used for things like blinds and doors. Interior surfaces, so when we have to do replacement of carpet, that's what we can use this money for. Mechanical systems, when we have to do a boiler update or we have to do some kind of piping, repiping or those kinds of pieces, we can use this money to do that kind of piece. Something in the plumbing area, a domestic hot water exchange, which I wasn't even aware of what it was until about 2 months ago, but that's a piece here at the high school that's on our agenda for the next couple of years. And then site projects, as you know, in Minnesota we have winter and road construction, and as a school we are not immune to that, and we always have some kind of pavement project going on. So what we thought we would do is just give you a very brief rundown. These are the kinds of, again, they're not things that are very exciting. What we're really fired up about is that the long-term facilities maintenance revenue program are going to allow us to do more of these things which are really core to our value of stewardship. It's going to then free dollars from the capital projects levy that we would have used before to address some of these projects. And it's going to allow us to use those dollars for other purposes, most likely more core teaching and learning kinds of equipment and resources and those kinds of pieces as we move forward. So this is a huge piece because it has a cascading effect. And so this is the first year, as we just, again, with that stewardship, we've talked about that throughout this presentation, so I'm happy I put it on there. As we move ahead, we know that some projects that are not going to be funded by this program can be funded by the capital projects levy. There's some things that won't qualify for this funding, but we can use the capital projects levy for those as we move on. Some projects are going to have to wait. It's the way it has always been. We reprioritize every year and say what are the things that are most important to do within the facilities area at this time. That additional revenue is significant over the next couple of years, as I mentioned at the last meeting. And then we're anticipating that MDE will modify what we'll have to submit moving forward.
Surprise.
We're not shocked by that at all. So we also want to point out that, as Dr. Richardson mentioned, we start our 8 facilities plan meetings tomorrow night. We have them running a couple here in late August and then all through the month of September. We'll also be doing a staff meeting at each building, and that will be rolling into October because we don't like to mess with staff building meetings in September. We'll roll those parts into October. But there are pieces that are on the current 10-year plan that, depending upon how we choose to move forward with the master facilities plan, could have an impact. So there are things that you could see on our very detailed 10-year plan, which we don't have to submit, that should we make a choice to go down a road in the master facilities plan of one particular building or remodeling or an update or construction, some of those things would obviously come off the 10-year plan. So I just want to point that out. And again, what we're looking for tonight is approval of that summary document that was in your packet. Again, this is the first time that we're submitting it, so we've followed the instructions of Dale and the other folks up at MDE, and we will, if you are to approve this, which we hope you will, we'll submit the statement of assurance that would say that we have passed it, and then we will learn, and we will move on from there, because there will be learning that we do from this particular first round of submission, and we know there will be some other changes to the process. So I would invite any questions at this time.
Board members, since this is an item for individual action, there's a motion of superintendent's recommendation to approve the long-term facilities maintenance review and 10-year plan.
So I would make that motion to approve the long-term facilities maintenance plan.
Moved by Ellen, second.
I will second that.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Now, are there questions for Dr. Hillman?
Tell me a bit about...
Comments?
Oh, I'm sorry. Me? I thought there was somebody else talking. Where is the asbestos? Where do we still have asbestos that needs removal or encapsulation?
We have a little bit you left at Longfellow and a little bit at Sibley, correct? So just very small amounts. They're typically floor tiling, which is in actually very good shape. Jim, of course, being new, he's gone through all the buildings. It's not a concern, but it's a piece that we want to continue to eliminate that as we can moving forward. We had a little bit at Sibley in the music area that was removed a couple of years back. And again, we've always tackled those projects and things that were the items that we believed were of greatest concern. This is encapsulated, it's tested, it meets all the, but it's something that we do want to make sure we can eliminate as time goes on.
Okay.
Do we have any, I think those are just the two places we talked about, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The only other place in addition to that is the music coming here.
Okay, so a little bit here left at the high school.
And we moved toward removal rather than encapsulation, but...
You bet.
Okay.
Get rid of it every chance we get.
Okay.
Any other questions? Ellen?
So you talked about, so we would be approving this plan, and you'd submit it, and you said you're going to learn something from it, and then depending on how the community meetings go and what the board decides this year, that will influence it. So what does the process look like? How often will we, as a board, be reviewing this? Do we have to review every time it changes, or?
Our understanding at this point, remember the rules were just written in mid-July.
Right.
What we've been told is that we will have to actually submit this on an annual basis.
Okay.
So every year we'll need to come back to you and ask you for an additional approval. I think that's one of the modifications we could see. I could see the department going to a multi-year strategy down the line like they've done with some other plans, but for what we're being told right now is that we need to approve the summary piece each year. And so even though we have the very detailed backup, as we've identified dollars in those particular areas, we're going to have to tie back the projects that we've done to those UFARS codes and make it work out. We could modify some of those pieces as needed as we move forward, as long as we stay within the same amounts within those finance codes. But we anticipate on an annual basis, Ellen.
And that would match up with, again, what the 25 largest districts do right now, because they submit an update on their deferred maintenance levy every year. So
And when we had the health and safety piece, we had to do an annual submission as well.
Other questions board members have? Okay. So we'll move forward with the vote. We have a motion and a second to approve the long-term facilities maintenance review and 10-year plan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Thank you. Matt, you're
Thank you.
staying there?
I'll stay right here, yes.
Okay.
Don't move.
Second item for individual action is the School Board Policy 428, District Sick Leave Allowance Bank, which we reviewed initially last week, and Matt, you will explain it.
Sure, and so at the last meeting, we had the first reading of the district sick leave policy, sick leave bank policy. It was a piece that we worked with the Northfield Education Association and other bargaining groups who already had some kind of sick leave bank within their contractual language. What we are suggesting is that we move to a district-wide sick leave bank. We are interested in, there are times when we have to function as a single bargaining unit and look at each of the bargaining units separately, and there's a time when we need to work as a district family. And over the past several years, we've found that we believe that a universal sick leave bank that would support all employees who qualify to accumulate leave, so they have to be working 20 hours or more a week, those folks would be able to join the bank. You join the bank once by donating 1 day, and then everyone who's part of the bank has to donate another day to replenish it should the bank be exhausted. So there's one minor change in this particular reading of the policy versus the last time that I just feel the need to point out to you is that when we originally wrote it, we said that a person would have had to have exhausted all sick leave, personal leave, and vacation. And as we looked at it, after we gave it to you the last time, we got a little bit of feedback. What we realized is, remember, we have some employees who are year-round who earn vacation, but the large majority of people do not work year-round and do not earn vacation. And so we wanted to make the language to be the same for everyone, so you exhaust all of your sick leave and all of your personal leave. Most people who have personal leave, it comes from their sick leave, so by exhausting their sick leave, they have exhausted that already. There are just a couple of groups whose personal leave is separate from their sick leave. So again, putting everyone who joins the bank on an equal playing field. So exhausting all of my sick leave, all of my personal leave, and then if I have joined the sick leave bank and I have a qualifying reason to draw from the bank, I can draw up to 20 days per year for the identified reasons in the policy. So just one minor change since the last time. But we really do think, as we have looked at this, we do believe that it's important to support all employees who are in a situation where they have some kind of crisis, health crisis of their own or whatever, because we know that by supporting people, that's the right thing to do, and it's an opportunity. People don't have to join. It's a choice, We think it's an opportunity to look at ourselves as one district family as opposed to individual bargaining groups in this particular case.
Okay, there's the overview then. So the superintendent's recommendation is to approve the school board policy 428, district sick leave allowance bank.
I'll move.
Moved by Margaret, second.
Second.
Second by Noel. Any questions or comments for Matt? Rob?
I have a question about the last item, number 7, under Roman numeral 4. It says, this policy may only be modified by mutual agreement of the Northfield Education Association, Independent School District number 659. This is allowing any employee who works 20 hours a week to opt into the sick leave bank, but the only people who can change it are the teachers union. The other people from other bargaining groups that might opt into it have no say in whether it can be modified. So I'm just wondering if that is a potential problem or issue.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to explain why we wrote it that way. One, there are a handful of policies, not very many, but there are a handful of policies that in various contracts it says the district can't modify this particular policy without, usually it's a meet and confer component. Our teachers unit is our largest bargaining group, more than 280 individuals who are part of that, and they have the sick leave, they have the largest sick leave bank pool. And in order to make this a district-wide policy, in order for it to be really successful, we felt we needed the teachers to be a big part of it. And when we approached them about it as part of the collective bargaining process, they were eager to step forward and help out because they agree that they feel that we need to look at this as one family. So the NEA really is making a significant concession because this is something that they had as part of their bargaining language. And part of the tentative agreement that you have before you tonight would actually strike that language from their agreement and move it into a district policy. And so as part of that, what we did feel was since they will always be the largest part of the people who are in the bank, we felt a reasonable thing to do would be to say that this is one of those policies that the district can't change unilaterally. We would come to you with any potential modifications that we would have to work through. We also have to remember there's only 4 other bargaining groups at this point that even have a sick leave bank. So there are many other people who are going to have an opportunity to be part of the sick leave bank who currently don't have access. And so as we looked at trying to move this forward, Rob, we really wanted to honor what the NEA had brought forward to the table by saying this is something we're going to completely collaborate on if we make changes in the future. Now, we have not we've made minor changes to the sick leave bank and the NEA over the last decade. It might have been, I think with the one change we allowed was it allowed for use with their dependent children. That was something that wasn't allowed before. But otherwise, the sick leave bank language remains virtually untouched since it was implemented many years ago. So we really felt it was a reasonable offering to the NEA to say you're giving up something out of your contract for the good of the rest of the district. And we feel that we'll make sure that you have a say if we're going to make a major change to we're going to make a change to the policy.
Okay, thanks.
And they will also provide the largest number of initial days into the bank, significantly larger because their bank has been in place, and so all the days that are currently in the contract sick leave bank will go into the bank that we currently have with the policy.
Good question, though. Thank you.
Is there any other questions or comments? Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the school board policy 428 district sick leave allowance bank. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Matt will stay up there.
One more time.
One more time.
And third item for individual action is the agreement with the Northfield Education Association.
And board members, I am very pleased to offer for your consideration the tentative agreement between Independent School District 659 and the Northfield Education Association. It's an agreement that covers between 2015 and 17. It's a standard 2-year agreement. I really want to thank the board members who served on our negotiations team, Ann and Julie and Noel, and then Ellen served as a substitute and helped out on a number of occasions when people were on vacation. And then I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Molly and Val, who really just do a whole bunch of work during this process. And of course, Dr. Richardson, who has forgotten more about negotiating than all of us will ever remember, and offers us really great advice. The one thing that I think you should be proud of is the way that the negotiations are conducted. It is incredibly amicable. It is a vigorous debate, as it should be, really making sure that both quote-unquote sides of the equation are represented well, and I feel very strongly that that's an important process to be very respectful in. Our teachers and negotiators were outstanding. Earl Wyman, their lead negotiator. Again, an atmosphere of trust, respect, and yet vigorous debate, and I think that that's important. The contract that you have before your consideration tonight has a couple of key points that I'll share with you. One is a 3% base increase in both of the years of the agreement. So a 3%, that means everyone on the matrix gets a 3% increase both in the 15-16 year and in the 16-17 year. One of the pieces that, and really when it comes to financial considerations, that is it. There's a couple of other pieces in terms of when we think about how we could make sure that we addressed all the needs of making sure we lifted all boats with that 3% increase. There's a half-year freeze on step increments. So anyone who is still moving through the salary schedule will not move a step until halfway through the year in terms of their paycheck. So they would move their step this year, but not until March 15th. So that's a key piece in terms of a balance to that 3% increase in each year. It's a half-year freeze in terms of where we are at the steps. The district will maintain its current contribution for insurance, district insurance contributions during the duration of the contract. That's a very important piece as well. And so as we look at those pieces, those are there's no changes to longevity. It really is a piece on the base salary schedule, which we think is really important at this time, considering a lot of teacher shortages that we're seeing, to really make us to have the best package to recruit and retain quality staff. We're able to work with that maintenance of the insurance increase because of a number of factors, including the self-funded health insurance that Dr. Richardson has mentioned, but we feel comfortable that we'll be able to maintain those district insurance contributions for the next couple of years and remain within the ratio of district contribution to employee contribution that we feel is appropriate for an entity our size. Those are the main highlights of the agreement. There are several language changes as well, and we'd certainly be willing to answer any questions that we could at this time.
Okay. It's an item for individual action, so we'll start with a motion to approve the 2015-17 master agreement with the Northfield Education Association as negotiated. Moved by Noel, second?
Second.
Second by Ann. Okay, questions, comments for Dr. Hillman or Dr. Richardson?
Good job.
Thank you.
Ann?
I would just like to give a little comment. It was a really nice procedure this time around, and you two did a great job, as did the teachers. And it was a really thorough discussion, and I think it was really amicable. It's great.
Thanks, Ann.
Any other questions or comments?
I just do want to point out that
Yes.
the teaching staff will be voting on September 3rd. And so, for many of you who've been around, you would know that typically the association would vote first, and then we would, ask you to vote. One of the key things is by voting tonight, and then hopefully as the association ratifies the contract, we're able to get all of the new salary rates and those pieces ready to go for the first paycheck in September, which avoids retroactive pay, which is significant, because retroactive pay takes a tremendous amount of extra work on the backs of our finance department. And so by getting this into place as we are right now, it's going to be a much smoother transition for everyone, both here in the district and for our teaching staff as well.
Good. Yes, I want to echo what Ann said. I think, I'm sorry, no, you go ahead.
No. I'm going to say what you're probably going to say, but
Well,
I would echo what Ann
yeah.
said. It was respectful, trusting, and very educational. It's a wonderful opportunity. We hear things that we have sometimes heard about, but haven't heard from the people who have the experience. And it really was an experience, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody's participation.
Yes, I mean, again, I'll jump in and echo what the two have said, and I think it's really interesting as board members. I think it's really important that we're there to see firsthand, to witness the dynamics, which were again, just very respectful, and each of the groups at the table shoulder an incredible amount of responsibility, and they handled their responsibility well, and we walked away with going forward doing hard work on behalf of the students, and I think we have to really thank Dr. Hillman, because you did an excellent job as our lead negotiator on behalf of the school board. I just don't think we could have had a better negotiator, and then with the team of Dr. Richardson and Dr. Hillman, it was just really an honor to be there as board members and to watch the process, and I think we can, personally, I
tried to provide the comic relief, but it's
And the
okay.
chocolate, yes.
And the chocolate, yes.
Chocolate helps.
Yeah.
Well, and I
I
think
think we're in
just
a good place.
Molly and Val do such a great job in terms of a
Absolutely.
lot of the heavy lifting, in terms of calculations, and really thinking about how the proposals have an organizational impact. So it not to keep going after the team piece, but it really is a team effort in terms of making sure we put together the best piece that honors our staff for recruiting and retaining the best teachers, while balancing that in terms of our fiscal stewardship and making sure that we can provide the highest quality programming for kids for as long as we can. And that's what we always say, and we really mean it. So I really appreciate what you've said, Julie, and everyone else. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much for your work. Okay, so we have any other questions or comments? No? Okay, we'll move forward with the vote. We have a motion and a seconded, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to approval of the consent grouping. As a reminder, there were a number of items in the table file, personnel items in the table file, to be added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? So moved. Moved by Ellen, seconded?
Second.
Seconded by Margaret. Any discussion? I'm sorry. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, items for information. We have in your packet, board members, there was the workshop schedule, Dr. Richardson.
Yes, if again, looking at our traditional schedule, remember that we do have 2 days of workshop for our new teachers. That starts this Wednesday. It will be Wednesday and Thursday. And Mary is really the ringleader or the ringmaster, or not the ring bearer, but basically in terms of really trying in 2 days to help these new folks coming into our system to really get acclimated to the kinds of things that we do. They're really thinking about kind of our structure in terms of our philosophy of education and why we're doing it. An opportunity really for them to meet a number of the different folks that they're going to work with through the year, including their building principals, folks from the NEA, various staff that work with specific programs like special education, and folks who work with PLCs and the RTI coaches and a number of other folks. Purpose, though, really being to make sure that when they step into the regular pre-service starting the following week, that although they're probably still petrified, they're at least petrified with a set of information that helps them to go forward. And then our regular in-service begins on Monday the 31st, runs through Thursday the 3rd of September. And again, you see the entire detail of that laid out. Remembering that as part of that, we have days committed to the Ready, Set, Go day for elementary, where they really do the effort of basically having each student being able to individually meet with their teacher, with their parent, to have an opportunity to get some initial assessment in terms of the student's skills and abilities, and to really get them on board to get started. So the first day of school is not really the first time they've been in the building, or the first time they've met their teacher, the first time they've been in their classroom. We also are providing a number of different opportunities for training for both our elementary and secondary staff in terms of programming and in terms of professional development. and including some time for them to also work in their rooms to be prepared. We also are working with new project pieces, again with Project Aware, which is coming up on Thursday, which is, again, is a training piece to help support mental health first aid, another part of the mental health efforts that we're trying to do for this year. And again, a federal grant that we were able to get, again, through the work of Zach and others to get that particular piece ready to go. And so we really believe that as we get through this process, they've had a thorough opportunity to look at the newest pieces of technology. They have had an ability to really to work on the curriculum that we're working with. They've had the ability to address some of the key major issues that we're moving forward with in the year, and we also are giving them a chance for elementary staff to meet with all of their families and all of their students as part of the 4 days of pre-service activity.
Thank you. And then secondly, you wanted to touch on an update with the SUN program.
Yes, just, and I gave you a chunk of that already, but let me just reinforce where we are. As you know, that with the SEMSEC program, we had moved through the process. We had everybody having had approved it at the board level. We'd had board members identified and administrators identified to move forward. And then we had concerns expressed by a couple of the districts about how we were going to fund the cost of the build-out of the facility. And if you remember, the facility was going to be located in Owatonna. We'd identified a facility, had been working with the landlord there, and had looked at the idea that we would get the entire build-out done as part of that lease agreement, so that the build-out was done and the lease was done, so that when we were finished, that anybody who needed any of the programs that would be provided there would have access to those programs, and the facility would be built out. There were some concerns expressed by a couple of the districts that they were really not prepared to participate in the full build-out, that they wanted to only pay for the build-out that had to do with programming that they had students ready to be in right away, and that they felt that therefore they should not only pay for only a portion of the build-out, but they only should pay for a portion of the lease going forward. And at that point, I think the other partners, I think, expressed some real concerns about, if we can't really get this piece going well, do we need to step back? And as a result, over the course of about a week, it was very clear that we didn't have the agreement on the part of all 5 members to move forward with the process. As I shared with you earlier, I still think in the end it would have been the best process long term, because if you talk to Cheryl or any of the other special ed directors, they will tell you that the number of kids that are going to qualify for the SUN program is going to do nothing but explode over the next few years. We're going to have more and more students that are going to need that program. We will still need space for our setting for EBD students, but the idea of being able to provide a large enough facility that could support the needs of all 5 districts and to do it in a very meaningful way and as efficiently and effectively is still, I think, the best solution. The problem is we do not have the partners at this point to move forward with that. So we've had at least 2 different meetings already with Faribault, and the approach that we're taking at this point is, if we're not able to move forward with those partners, we're working to put together a different strategy to basically implement a 2-district partnership to provide both the SUN program for students with unique needs and also the Setting for EBD program. One of the issues with Faribault in the past is that they had run out of space, and we also believe that there is some real benefits from separating the students who are in the SUN program from the students who are in the Level 4 EBD program. So as a result of those initial discussions with Faribault, We've determined that Faribault would continue to provide the EBD programming and provide the STEP transitions program, and that we would take over providing the SUN program. And as a result, that means that we need to provide a facility that will make that happen. We began by looking at some locations within our community that were of the right size to basically do the build-out. We had a local realtor who was kind enough to do some research for us and identify some possibilities, and we've had a chance to look at those and to also do some brainstorming, and Jim has really helped us there in terms of doing kind of the initial brainstorming about what might be the build-out costs for various buildings. And then we had almost a serendipitous session where basically Cheryl had talked to the educational director at Laura Baker, and at that point they were indicating that their numbers are very low. They have only 5 students currently that are in their educational program, and they have a large building that's their educational building, which also has a full kitchen, commercial kitchen, and a large-size multipurpose room cafeteria, as well as multiple classrooms and a sensory room and all the other pieces. So we have had a meeting with individuals from Laura Baker to talk about an interest in collaboration with them, and we've also had a chance to go out and visit their building and do a walkthrough of the facilities. So I know that their director, Sandy Gertis, basically has shared with their board members that there's some interest in looking at a collaborative process. What we really see it as the potential of a real win-win situation, because as I mentioned to you earlier, we are now in a position with Laura Baker Services that if they have any student who is school age in their program, we have to oversee the due process of all their special education programming for education. So we're already needing to do that anyway. And because their numbers are small, right now out of the 5 kids that they have, 2 of them are our students. So the idea would be if we would provide the educational program using their facility, and we would work a collaborative process with them to do the build-out of the facility, to do the other things that would need to be in place. The build-out is significantly smaller in cost and size because a lot of the building is already built in terms of the hardened walls, the steel doors, steel door frames, large open space with 11-foot ceilings that could be available for a large motor room and so on. So, you know, we're not at a point yet where we're ready to say it's this or this or this, but we are really trying to move forward as expeditiously as possible in terms of identifying what's the best solution for us. And we have made a commitment to Faribault that we will be prepared to host the SUN program in the fall of 2016. If we look at the space, it may give us some ability also to have individuals from other districts who might have students who need SUN programming, might also have the ability to have those students tuition into the program and also be supported. So it has the benefit, I think, for Laura Baker to really fully utilize that program. Plus, as a district, we would pay a lease to Laura Baker for the educational facility. We would be able to provide full-time special ed educational services for students that they have in their program who need educational services in their school age. And the kitchen facility could provide the lunch program for us, as well as they, I know, provide, I think, the meal program for the cottages at Laura Baker, but they do not, they no longer use the cafeteria. They actually, I think, have the residents basically eat in their cottages. And so the ability to modify the lunchroom, multipurpose room, I think is really right there. So I guess my sense is we are in a much better place than we were a couple weeks ago when we were saying, oh my goodness, all the work we did all summer kind of vaporized. And we hope to be able to share with you within the next several weeks a final direction, which would include basically a lease agreement that we would make with either one of the two buildings that we looked at here in the community or with Laura Baker, and then to move forward with doing the build-out that would need to occur on any of the facilities to prepare us to implement a new program in the fall of 2016. But I think we'll be ready to be there, and it's so I think we're in a good position, and again, one which I think will meet the needs of our kids and make sure that our most fragile special education students have the programs that they need. So that's kind of what's happening with that particular piece, and so.
Board members have any questions? No.
I'm sure there's going to be a question here and something I'm going to say. I haven't formulated it yet. Laura Baker probably has got some responsibility that students would be assigned to that facility that may be outside of our district.
Yes.
Is there a priority that would need to be established to be sure that we've got sufficient rights to that program?
My sense is, and that part of the thing that we need to realize about Laura Baker, it is a unique program. There's nothing like it anywhere else in the state, and it's mainly because the program was created 100 years ago, and that it is really under the Department of Human Services, where every other special education program is under the purview of the Minnesota Department of Education. And only very recently have we seen this need for us to oversee their programming. Otherwise, 2 years ago, if they brought a student into the program, they basically ran their own educational program, and it was totally up to them, and as long as Department of Human Services agreed, it was fine. Now they can't do that anymore. Our belief is with the numbers that they currently have or would predict they would have, we could absorb their students into our program. And in fact, when we talked to Sandy the other day, Cheryl was talking with her, and I think they looked at each other and said, well, the kids that we're serving are exactly the same kids. The kids that they may have that are from outside our district are exactly the same kids as we were serving in Northfield or in Faribault. So, and with the idea that there are 6 full classrooms, plus a sensory room, a motor room, observation room spaces, office spaces, as well as this huge multi-purpose space, which we believe we could do some work in to create a large motor space where kids could play volleyball and do other kinds of things. It really looks like a very viable alternative for us to look at. So yes, I think we could include any of the students that they have, and in fact, we would have to have been responsible for any child that they brought in from another district who was a K-12 student anyway, because again, we have to oversee every student who's there for a special ed reason.
Thank you.
You bet.
Other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you for the update and for the work. You've got a lot accomplished in a couple weeks.
We've been dancing about as fast as we can. So, but I think it's a good thing. And again, I appreciate Matt and Val and Jim and others who have jumped right in and worked with this along with Cheryl. And really it was Cheryl's, again, kind of serendipitous conversation with the director at Laura Baker about, are there any possibilities we can do this? And they were definitely saying, yes, we think there might be some real possibilities of making this happen.
Excellent.
So,
Thank you. I think did you want to touch on the master facilities meetings?
Yes, I'd like to, and I'd like Matt to kind of follow up. So I think the key piece here, again, we're getting ready to take the tour on the road again, starting tomorrow night. We have basically 7 meetings scheduled, beginning on the 25th and going through the 29th of September. all of the meetings will be identical. In other words, the information presented will be the same. So people just need to come to one of the meetings. The difference between these sessions and the sessions we did last spring are that these are going to focus more closely on what are the options that we think are the most important to look at. And remember, when we talked about the district master facilities plan last time, we talked about what were kind of independent options of either remodeling or addition or whatever on the individual buildings. And then we talked about some interdependent options which could affect basically Greenville Park and the preschool programming and community services, or could impact the high school building. And so what we want to be able to do is give people more detail on what those options might look like. And again, in a very, there will not be a drawing of each building or whatever, but it will be, here are the kinds of things that will happen in each site. And then trying to share with folks at least a preliminary calculation of what kinds of costs are involved depending on the programs to be implemented. So if we're on the low end with simply the remodeling and some additions versus if we're on the full-blown piece where we're looking at a major change for the high school and a major change for Greenville Park and Longfellow and the community actions or the community resource center and CRC, we want to be able to show people what those costs would be and the impact that that's going to have on them as property taxpayers, because we know in the end people are going to want to look at, well, what's this going to cost me if this actually is going to happen, and what are the difference in terms of what's there. So that's really our hope beginning tomorrow night, is that we can lay that out, and then the structure that Matt and I have for this particular piece will be to do the presentation, allow people then to meet in small groups and talk about what they've heard, and then before they exit, to actually do a brief survey where they look at the different options and say to us, yeah, I think that's an option that really should be considered, and I'd be in favor of that. I like this option, or I think this option might be okay, but I'd need a lot more information about it before I could really decide. Or really, I'm not very interested in this option, and you'd have to do a lot to really convince me that this needs to go forward. The key piece here is simply to get some beginning feedback from the community in terms of kind of where people are. I think Noel and I have talked about, and Noel's actually, I think, talked here multiple times about the fact that the community really needs to hear and understand this multiple times to really be prepared to think about moving forward with any kind of significant facilities modifications. So we think it's going to be important to share this several times. And again, people only need to find one of these meeting dates that will work, because they're going to hear exactly the same information at each one. But it will be one whole notch more specific than the presentations we made last spring, which were kind of just very general about what's there. So we'll talk more specifically about what would happen in each building with the different kinds of projects and what kinds of costs would be there. Help me, Matt, with what else we need to share.
I don't think you need any help. You really nailed that pretty well.
Okay.
And so I think the key thing is that last fall we had a blank canvas. We asked people what they thought because, again, we're operating from a position of strength. Our facilities are not in crisis. So we asked them what they thought. We have worked with ATS&R to put a little bit more color, a little bit more shape to the potential plans. Now we're going to ask for additional feedback. And this probably won't be the last time we ask for feedback as we move forward. So our goal is, we have worked with Ellers Incorporated as well to provide us some very preliminary, if we were to choose this approach, a person with a $200,000 house could reasonably think to pay this amount per year. So we're going to give some much more details in these particular meetings. We really invite people to come and to discuss this with us because it's very important.
Good. Is there any additional Skyward updates planned or
we'll send out
notices?
a reminder tomorrow morning again. Okay. We sent out the initial reminder or the initial piece about 10 days ago because we like to give people at least 2 weeks, about 10 days ahead of time. Brittany Nessett wrote a piece for the Northfield News, again, to try to get that out there as well. We've had it on the district website front page. We'll send out another reminder tomorrow, and then about halfway through the cycle, we'll send another reminder in terms of saying, hey, there's 4 meetings left, and here they are. And I think one things that we'll do in tomorrow's Skylar is that we've been we've used very tentative language because we want it to be very clear that people know we do not have a plan that we've selected yet. We are really interested in people's feedback moving forward. But when we send it out tomorrow, we are going to use terms like remodel or new construction, because I do think while we're trying to be very tentative with the language so people know that we're truly interested in what they're thinking, that we don't have some kind of plan already constructed, we think those are the things that we think will get people's attention to show up to the meetings. Because we've been at some meetings where it's Chris and I and a couple of other people, and we'd prefer to have a full house if we can.
Yes, I think that's good. I think people have to have a reason to get in their car and drive over there. And I think if you start to say, district master facilities plan is so broad-based, but how does it affect me as a parent, and how is it going to affect my student? And if I hear, there's some security potential things at this building, and there's some, other things, it's like, oh, yeah, you know what, that's important to me, I'm gonna go. So I think that'll be good.
Chris and I are usually informative and entertaining, so that should be enough to draw people out, but
I don't think so. Not even the meat lottery, I think, is going to get us there. I think we need to give people, and our effort will be to provide detail, but I guess I really want to reinforce what Matt is saying. We do not have any preconceived notion at this point as to what is the best option. But we need to give people enough additional data now that they can begin coming back to us saying, I really think this is the right way to go with the high school. I think this is the right thing to do with Sibley, or this is what I think we should do with Greenvale Park, as opposed to the more general statements that we've made. Because I think if we leave it just as the district master facilities plan, nobody really knows what that exactly entails. And so our effort will be to try to tighten that up significantly for the presentations that we're going to do over the next several weeks.
We're ready to roll.
Anyone have any questions then on that? No? Okay. So I'll just remind everyone, future meetings, we're already into September. Monday, September 14th and Monday, September 28th. Okay, with that, I ask for a motion that we adjourn. Moved by Jeff, second. Second by Rob.
Come on.
So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.